Hey now, good morning. Happy Wednesday, PSW staff, clients, friends joining us. It was a real pleasure looking at Coltrane yesterday. We reviewed his playing, his life, and it's these nice classes to revisit these huge giants, because obviously talking about 10 minutes about these people is a huge injustice, because there's just so many different pathways we can take. And as I'm moving along with these classes, as we're learning about the music fundamentals and chords and like I've mentioned, we don't need to learn how to read music, but how music is just constructed, how it's shown on the page, and how the artist, thinks and plays his saxophone, in this case Coltrane, and thinks about those chords and improvises off of them. It's kind of amazing. So we're going to look at somebody who's, one of the fastest hard bop saxophonists in jazz. Late 50s, early 60s. So it's gonna be such a pleasure. So today we're gonna look at the great mind of Johnny Griffin. We've looked at a lot of tenor saxophone players. Obviously the tenor is, kind of the lower register of the saxophone. Coltrane played soprano for My Favorite Things. And, all of these, like I explained yesterday, part of the reed family. So the fingerings are the same for reed instruments, clarinets, oboes, saxophones. It's a little bit different, but mostly the same fingerings. So we've looked at Lester Young and Ben Webster. Those guys are earlier. A lot of Coltrane and Griffin were influenced by those guys. Those guys played with Count Basie, and we've talked about those guys, and what we will before. But they have a really way different sound, because jazz wasn't as the hard bop comes after bebop, but they weren't bebop. Lester Young, Ben Webster, they were more relaxed style of playing swing music going into early bebop. But they don't play bebop. They're nothing like Charlie Parker. So we looked at those tenor saxophonists. We looked at a tenor. John Coltrane plays tenor sax, even though My Favorite Things was on soprano. Johnny Griffin is another tenor sax player that's one of the fastest, and not that fast is the best, but just a massive amount of talent. Let's go to Chicago. It's cold right now, but let's leave up the Pixar Studios in California, and let's go over to Chicago. He's born in 1928, so a little bit younger than Coltrane, about 2 years younger. His mother was a singer. Dad played the cornet, which is kind of like a smaller trumpet, and he started studying music in high school, and clarinet and oboe. He studies all these instruments. And then when he meets Lionel Hampton, we talked about Lionel Hampton, huge big band leader. Hampton was so big. When Hampton says, you should play tenor. So after that, after high school graduation, meets up with Lionel Hampton. Lionel says, play tenor. And so he starts coming to Los Angeles to record a bunch of stuff with Lionel Hampton in the mid-40s. But he's only 17 years old, so already he's a prodigy. And when he returns to Chicago after being in the Army for a few years, he's established as a pretty legit saxophonist. It's especially when Thelonious Monk finds him, and his career is super solidified by playing with Thelonious Monk. We know Thelonious Monk, of course. We've talked about the bebop jazz piano player, but he was different than Bud Powell. He wasn't really playing bebop like this fast. Monk was plunking out odd melodies and things with his, and then stomping with his feet. We'll look at Monk again, but he had original compositions. He had such an original thinker, Thelonious Monk, And so we'll look at, he plays with Johnny Griffin at the 5 spot, which was a very famous spot that Eric Dolphy played at. So we'll look at that. So Monk puts him on the map, in terms of legitimacy. And then he joins Art Blakey's band. Art Blakey we haven't talked about, but Art Blakey had the hottest hard bop band in town. If you were with part of the Messengers, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And then he comes out with a blow-in session, which actually has John Coltrane playing on this album with Hank Mobley, another tenor saxophonist we haven't looked at. So he's got 3 tenor saxophones there. And then he's got 18-year-old Lee Morgan there, who just is amazing. Lee and Johnny Griffin have some similarities, even though they're playing different instruments. And it's under the realm of hard bop. But they have similarities in their, as we're hearing Johnny Griffin, how they approach and each note brilliantly. A spark. It's not mellow jazz at all. It's deliberate playing, deliberate tonguing and phrasing that's very kind of flashy in a way that sounds brilliant. So hard bop's really coming in the 50s, right? Early 60s, and then 60s changes, jazz changes. Coltrane has a lot to do with the change because he's more into free jazz, along with people like Ornette Coleman. We'll talk about him, and Eric Dolphy. But Dolphy's dead in 1964. Coltrane's dies in 1967. But 63, Griffin is still not in the old school, but still in the hard bop tradition. And one thing about Griffin is just, I love his sound and his soloing so much. He's not he didn't change the world of jazz, I don't think, in the sense of being a revolutionary thinker. He's just a really damn good player. And so that's why we're talking about him today. But wasn't as innovative as Miles and Coltrane. Because there's a change happening in the 60s, particularly in New York and in America. He goes to Europe, and that's a smart move because he flourishes really well in Europe. Europeans love jazz. They're always welcoming in, jazz musicians. So he moves to Europe pretty much from the 60s until he dies in 2008. He's a European. So as we're hearing his playing is fusing bebop and swing music. He's got that swing music from the 30s and 40s, bebop from the 50s, and when he's playing, he's incorporating all of these bebop and swing, where it's fast, but it's super melodic fast. It's deliberate playing, like I said with Lee Morgan. But his style, amazing technique. It sounds easy to play that fast, but to play that fast and melodic and to have that much to say, using the bebop language was just so hard. A lot of things. Something else he would do is use quotations in his music. A lot of other jazz musicians did that. What do I mean? Well, the Sailor's Hornpipe? Yeah. So he uses this in the middle of a Monk solo. Listen to this. It's funny, right? It gets you to think, wait, I know that song, but he's incorporating that on the spot in his solo. Another example? Well, okay, there's this musical, Meet Me in St. Louis. We haven't talked about that, but one of my favorites. We'll do a class on Meet Me in St. Louis. He takes, just listen to this little song.
Choose partners, skip to Maloo. Choose partners, skip to Maloo. Choose partners, skip to Maloo. Skip to Maloo, my darling.
Flies in the buttermilk, shoo, shoo, shoo. Flies in the buttermilk, shoo, shoo, shoo. Flies in the buttermilk, shoo, shoo, shoo. Skip to Maloo, my darling.
Yeah, so somehow he's watched this movie, he loves this music in it, and he's going to incorporate that little da 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 da. He's going to incorporate it in this solo. Very witty and funny, right? So he's just got masterful command over the instrument where, like Jimi Hendrix, it was just a part of their body. They could just, whatever they felt, they could pick up their instrument and play, and you just would hear their soul play through it. Supposedly a good businessman, great dresser, very well liked, very, very personable. So lives until 2008. You never hear that about a jazz musician. He's 80 when he dies in France. And in '95, Berkeley, the big Berkeley College of Music, gave him an honorary doctorate. So, you know, that's also nice to get recognition. So just a little bit of Johnny Griffin, not really talked about that much, but should be. An amazing hard bop jazz saxophonist, and yeah, I'd say he's really akin to Lee Morgan as a player. Their technique is very similar, even though there's different instruments. So tomorrow we're going to go back to LA, and hope you enjoyed Johnny Griffin, one of my favorites ever. And have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.